long time ago, I paid, I think it was about £100 for my 5.1 surround sound system, as well as an AV receiver / amp to drive them all. And since then, I've traded up through an Onkyo amp, a Yamaha amp, and around maybe 5 years ago, a Denon amp. From my first ever home to our now forever family home, which very fortunately already had the wiring for 5.1 speakers in the walls. And then through those years, I have kept those same speakers, upgrading TVs, upgrading soundbars, upgrading AV receivers and amps. And over time, I have seen Sonos release soundbar after smart soundbar and wireless speakers like the Sonos 1s, the 5s, and more recently, the Era 100s and 300s. And I just found myself wondering, should I replace my old and kind of tired, cheap, traditional 5.1 system? And should I upgrade to the much more modern, shiny, smarter, and Dolby Atmos supporting Sonos system? Honestly, I have spent so much time researching and Googling for the answer here. Everyone I spoke to said, well, obviously a proper wired system is going to be better. But still, whatever reason, I kept finding myself drawn towards the Sonos system. Maybe it had something to do with this guy.
You'll have to forgive the following noises.
How cool is that?
Wow. Awesome!
No, what? Hello.
And so what actually happened, because, you know, I needed to know, and much to the dismay of my wife, is, well, I got both. Okay, so this didn't really pan out how I thought it would. What happened next was just sheer luck. Sonos themselves actually sent out their premium immersive set with the Arc Ultra soundbar. So that's the Arc Ultra, a Sub 4, and a pair of the Era 100s for the rear surrounds. But before you click away, because, you know, this guy is obviously going to say nice things about Sonos because, you know, sent me a whole freaking setup. So firstly, there are issues, like big issues, that have actually made me not want to keep the Sonos. Like the sound dropping out randomly, like mid-watching things.
It's going to be hard taking anyway.
Where's the audio gone? Literally just cut in, cut out.
Oh, I'm just like...
No, it's working.
Wall. No. Videography is getting yourself.
It's cut off again. Huh? And secondly, because there was some weird confusion because it was Sonos US that sent everything over, which then meant they had all these weird plugs on them that don't work here in the UK, so that was fun. And because I actually wanted to do a proper comparison, I managed to get on a call with Sonos and, well, A, get them to send out some proper UK power cables, which happened literally last week, over a month after they sent the speakers out. And then B, they also sent out a pair of Era 300s and a Sub Mini because I wanted to actually compare and hear the difference between them. So there is a lot to unpack here. And a quick one before we do unpack, obviously. According to YouTube, 95% of people watching these videos aren't actually subscribed to the channel, and it does make a huge difference to our ability to make these sorts of videos if you are to subscribe. So it's completely free, and it does help me to continue making more betterer videos. So if you do wish to, go hit that subscribe button underneath this video. Now, unboxing and setting up the Sonos is kind of an Apple-esque experience. The boxes themselves are really well designed, where you have these clips you can slide and then the lid comes off and then you can very easily get to the speaker. It is pretty cool, but you will totally forget about this after, you know, a day, maybe 2 days of actually using them. But yeah, it's really nice, you know, a very over-engineered design. Now, onto placing them, and this is where the Sonos really shines because they are, you know, wireless speakers, even though they still require a power cable. You can kind of place them wherever you want, as long as you have a power socket near them. Now, with the Arc Ultra, that's probably going to be underneath your TV. And yes, I know R/TV too high, just don't judge. Now, my problem, and this is very much a me problem, is that I bought a Samsung TV with a One Connect box, which means that I can connect all of my sources, my Apple TV, games console, into the One Connect box, and then have one single cable going from the One Connect box to the TV. So for me, the One Connect box sits on top of my shelving unit over here, and it's here because, well, when I bought the TV, I was under the impression that they'd make a One Connect cable longer than just 3 meters, which they don't. And I know because I bought and then returned all of them. Now, all the soundbars use ARC over HDMI, which is the audio return channel, which means that I need to feed an HDMI cable from the One Connect box to the Sonos Arc Ultra, which just meant I had to buy a super long HDMI and power cable, which I did. But again, very much a me issue. Most people will probably have power and be able to wire directly into their TV's ARC ports, so no issues there for most people. Now the sub, also pretty simple, just plug in wherever you want it to go. Now I did play with it being right next to me where I was sat on the sofa, but honestly after some playing around I just decided to put it on the left of the TV. And then with the rear Era 100s, I actually bought some cheaper stands from them off of Amazon and placed them at the edge of the sofa, slightly angled in. Now ideally these should be behind the sofa, but my setup here, that's all the space I have in this room. And so the setup in general was pretty straightforward. You fire up the Sonos app, you add the soundbar, add the sub, and then add the 2 speakers as a stereo pair, and then add them to the soundbar. And now you have your like Dolby Atmos system all set up and ready to go. And of course, don't forget throughout this whole video, one of the things going for the Sonos system is that it integrates with the rest of the Sonos ecosystem to give you this, full house-wide music in every room of your house where you have a Sonos speaker. We even have a battery-powered Sonos Move speaker outdoors. Sounds incredible. And what an experience watching my first movie was on this thing. That's sub 4 is just gigantic compared to my previous sub. It really makes you feel a lot more of whatever you're watching. And between the Arc Ultra soundbar, the sub 4 and the rear speakers, I was just genuinely really impressed here. And this is how we watched our TV for the next month. Everything from movies to series to Bluey episodes, of course. Now I use the app almost daily, and honestly, up until the point of shooting this video, I didn't really have any issues with the app whatsoever. Now I know that has been a very big issue recently with Sonos, and actually so much so that the CEO of Sonos actually stepped down recently because of what a disaster the app has been. And I read all the comments. Speakers dropping off the system, then the speakers wouldn't be found when trying to re-add them. One phone would work when a partner's phone wouldn't find the system at all. And it's just been a huge mess. And so I'm not going to downplay that because a lot of people are still very much having those issues. And so when we came to make this video today, I tried removing the Era 100s and then re-adding the Era 300s into my system to swap them over, and they just wouldn't connect. Or rather, they'd connect and then just not work. And the app said you have to then switch it off, switch it back on again, that old usual trick. And even when trying to tune the existing speakers, which were working, that also failed. So yeah, not a great experience today. But like I said, weirdly today was the first time I've had any app kind of issues whatsoever. But there are also other smart features that are available to you on Sonos that aren't necessarily available on other systems, which we'll get to in just a moment. And there are, other issues too. For me, the sound dropping out is probably the biggest and most frustrating issue that I've had. There you are, you're enjoying watching Severance, and then every 10 seconds or so, nothing, just nothing. The entire system cuts out.
Take her down. It's gonna be hard taking anybody.
Where's the audio gone? Literally just cut in, cut out. You come back? And you might be thinking, well, that's because it's wireless. Except it's not. Like the Arc soundbar itself is physically hardwired into the TV via that HDMI port. Now I could understand, if the surrounds and the sub dropped out due to the Wi-Fi issues, but the Arc Ultra definitely shouldn't drop out. And this was the entire system dropping out.
Whoa, no. Videography is getting yourself.
Let's cut off again. There's no reason why it happens multiple times whatsoever, to the point where it's just not worth using them at all if they can't work reliably. And that is really what caused me issues with this system. Now, in terms of whether it's worth going for the Era 300s over the 100s are far more forgiving with their position, but the Era 300s really are designed to be mounted directly behind you and facing towards the opposite wall, because they're speakers that, again, with Dolby Atmos, they bounce sounds off the ceiling and off the opposite wall, which the Era 100s don't have that Dolby Atmos feature. So for my situation, unless I move my sofa or couch forwards a few feet, I just can't do that. So for me, the Era 100s do work better. But if you do have the space for the 300s to be positioned properly behind you, then absolutely go for the 300s if you can afford them. Oh, and also the Sub Mini. I didn't find a way to pair the Sub Mini with the Arc Ultra. It just tells me it's not supported. So instead, I put that in my games room with the Sonos Beam, much smaller Sonos Beam, and it works great, but it's very hard to compare with the Sub 4 when it's on a, a totally different system. But I would say the Sub 4 is a definite major step up as far as I'm concerned from the Sub Mini. Now, what I do see is that this system does sound incredible, and this is going from my previous system before to the Sonos system. And then being Sonos, the pros are, of course, you can place them anywhere that you have a PowerPoint. So that means the Sub can literally go anywhere you want next to the sofa, and you don't have to worry about running speaker cable around, your whole room to get a wired system working. Now, I also do like in the app, there is a toggle switch for things like night mode, which reduces the sub and the low end frequencies. So you can still enjoy a decent audio experience late at night without annoying your neighbors or waking your kids up with the Sub. And I also can't lie, the Sonos speakers, they always look really, really nice. My wife wasn't very keen on the white, but we got what we were given. So I think they're nice. Now, before we move on, another benefit of Sonos, as I mentioned, is this whole smart home piece. And the sponsor for this video, Homey, is in this really interesting place in the market right now. You see, most people, and myself included, start out on something like Apple Home or Google Home. And then when we outgrow those systems, maybe because we want to do something a little bit more complicated, or you're just using products that either platform doesn't support. And so you jump all the way to using something like Home Assistant. Now, I've been using it for a long time. I'm running it on my Mac Mini at the moment as a virtual machine. Now, before that, it was running on a NAS. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi or in a Docker, all of which sounds really complicated to most people. And I'll be honest, I have given up on quite a few things with Home Assistant because, well, just at a certain point, it literally requires you to write your own code to make certain devices or make certain automations work. So Homey has really surprised me recently, and it basically sits in between those two platforms. It supports way more products than Apple or Google Home, but requires way less technical skills than a Home Assistant does. Now, all of this runs on one box, and it has everything you need to talk to any device, no matter what technology it's using. So Z-Wave, Z-Wave, Zigbee, Matter. Take my new fancy unified doorbell that has this tiny, maybe not tiny, tiny and really quiet speaker that goes off when someone's at the door. Now with Homey, it is so simple to create what's called a flow automation that says when doorbell pushed, play sound on all Sonos speakers in the house. Maybe even pause the TV, flash some lights, other things like that. No joke, I tried doing this in a Home Assistant the other day. New automation, device, doorbell, trigger, and there is no trigger for the doorbell actually being pushed. Now cue the internet forum suggesting to debug the problem or code your own sensor to listen to the doorbell. And this is exactly what I mean. I love Home Assistant, but sometimes it is so frustratingly overcomplicated. And the simplicity of Homey, yet it's still very wide coverage of basically every product that I currently own, really does make me consider if this could actually completely replace my Home Assistant system with just something that's this one box. There's no maintenance required. If we have a power cut, I don't have to worry about whether my Mac boots up and then starts the Home Assistant virtual machine, and whether the Z-Wave USB stick has lost its mapping to none of my Z-Wave devices work. All these kind of things just happen all the time. There's plugins to update all the time. Every time I open a Home Assistant, that was a very long way of saying, if you are interested, there's going to be a link down below where you can check out Homey for yourself. And actually, maybe let me know if this is something that you would be interested in seeing a more detailed review of. As you can probably tell, I'm really, really keen and into my smart home tech. I just never know if this is actually something that anyone else cares about. So yeah, just let me know down below. So a few weeks after the Sonos system went in, and kind of because the audio dropout issue was happening, I decided that I was definitely going to go ahead and upgrade my existing system whilst trying to spend around about the same amount of money. So for the system that I received, that includes the Era 300s, that is around about 1,000 Great British pounds here. So in the end, after a lot of research, I picked up a pair of KEF Q7 floor standing speakers, a used SVS 2000 Pro subwoofer, a POLK S35 center speaker, and a pair of KEF Q150 rear surround speakers, which all in all came to around about £2,300. And if you are interested, I will leave some links down below for like the exact system that I actually went with. Now, just to note here, in my situation, I already had a suitably capable amp, which is this Denon AV RX 3300W, which if you bought one used today, would bring the total cost of the entire system to around about maybe the same, maybe like a fraction more of the cost of the Sonos system, depending on things like the discounts and once you've factored in the cost of like speaker wire and things like that, if you were building this out for the first time. Now, note here that I say the words building this out, whereas Sonos is very much just plug it in and you're done, as long as the app works. So I placed the KEF floor standing speakers to either side of the TV. The subwoofer actually placed on the opposite side of the Sonos sub. The center speaker, I just had to pick one specifically because it's one of the only ones that actually fits on the mantelpiece underneath my Samsung TV. And then of course the Q150s that simply just replaced my existing rear speakers, albeit with some much larger wall mounts. Now the notable omission here is that there are no Atmos speakers, which honestly I really wanted to do because, you know, the Sonos Arc Ultra does have Atmos, like these upwards firing speakers that kind of, again, what I said, bounce it off the ceiling. But the additional cost of Atmos speakers, and especially the KEF Atmos speakers, I just couldn't justify it for this kind of test and comparison we were going through. Anyway, every single professional audio person I spoke to whilst designing this whole system thing told me that a good 5.1 system would absolutely blow the Sonos out of the water. So I just wanted to put that to the test. So with everything wired up, I jacked up the volume a little because, you know, like the Sonos, I just really want that like home theater cinema sound system experience. And oh my good Lord, this system deliver it.
Here it comes. Dragonwood defending. Here it comes. Dragonwood defending.
And thus, here is the problem, because it is difficult to kind of impossible to explain and definitely show you through a YouTube video. Just the sound quality of what comes out of these speakers just sounds much clearer, much more defined, much less muddy than the Sonos speakers. And it has this much wider soundstage because, well, everything is wider. The speakers are separated. You've got voices coming from the center speaker, everything else coming from the fronts, the rears putting out the proper rear surrounds, and the sub picks up everything that should be the sub frequencies. Now, yes, you do lose out on the Atmos sound of like the things flying over your head. But honestly, like movies like this Top Gun film, when all of the action is happening, like the jets are flying everywhere, it just makes you feel like just, holy shit, it sounds so good.
There's another one. Dragonwood defending.
And everything from like Bluey to shows to movies. Wicked just came out, and that end sequence just punches with the new system in a way that the Sonos just doesn't come close to. But as with everything, this system also has its issues. Of course, you have to run wires to every speaker, which, whilst it isn't expensive, can, yes, be time consuming or just not practical depending on the room's layout. Whereas with the Sonos, it's just, you know, find a nearby power socket and you're practically done. The whole app experience also notably bad here, although I guess you could argue that at least it works. Now the Denon amp has its own app, which is kind of clunky. The SVS sub has its own separate app. And whilst you can switch on a night mode or just lower the sub's volume in the SVS app, it's not as easy as on the Sonos, which is just one tap for night mode and it's done. And although the Sonos system has the whole, Sonos ecosystem thing, you can still use smarts from the Denon app to play things like AirPlay or Spotify's Play Music on the system. It just won't be tied to other systems around the home like the Sonos system is. Now, the thing that was really pushing me towards a Sonos system also is the fact that you still, to this day, require this huge AV receiver and amp thing to drive all of the speakers. Honestly, I still can't understand why in the now 2 decades of me using amps and receivers, why they haven't developed, smaller components, more efficient components. We can now squeeze entire computing power into something as slim as a MacBook Air. And I still don't need my amp to also have, multiple HDMI inputs because my TV has multiple HDMI inputs. All I need is an amp to just do the amp stuff. Because again, with a receiver, I found that over the years that my TVs and games consoles always get better and better, like 4K, 8K, 120 Hertz, 240 Hertz. Whereas these amps are either, much slower to catch up or just become yet another expensive thing that you have to upgrade along with, the new TV or the new gaming device. There is also far too much choice for new buyers. And when I was asking multiple people for their advice, like 2 AV stores and a professional installer who installs these systems daily, none of them could agree as to whether I should have a matching KEF but slimline dedicated center speaker or a more powerful but different brand center speaker, or just not even use a center speaker and just let the 2 floor standing speakers create this fake phantom center channel. All of them said different things. And then there is the online help. My God, do I love Reddit for, countless posts and advice on what to do, where to place speakers, which speakers to buy. But you also enter into the realms of audiophilia, I don't know if that's a word, like home theater, home cinema, home audio. These all attract a very unique kind of person. And the kind of person who told me that I should totally rearrange my family living room into rows of bench seating like a cinema, because that was the only logical place that I could put my speakers in their ideal positions, and that I am basically an idiot for considering anything otherwise. Because sure, when we have friends over, we want to be staring at the backs of each other's heads when chatting and staring at a black rectangle on the wall that isn't even switched on. Look, there is some great advice out there, but at some point there is a certain reality that we don't all have these, dedicated space for a cinema room in our houses, and that space does need to serve other purposes as well, particularly with a young family. And so the follow-on issue from going down this route is that it does put you on this dangerously expensive path of yet another hobby, like starting off with, which speakers do you get the best sound for your budget? But now that's in, I'm like, well, now I need to think about the source material, because now I have this, decent surround system. You realize that, streaming content from Netflix and Apple TV aren't going to be as good as proper Blu-ray versions. But I have a PS5, which can play Blu-rays, but it's not at the same level of quality that a proper Blu-ray player can play. And so you start this never-ending path of, ooh, what can I upgrade next? Whilst putting this surround sound system together, I also picked up some KEF LS50 messes for the desk in my studio, along with this WIM amp. It is just so difficult not to get drawn in. But honestly, for me, the pros outweighs the Sonos system. For me, again, it sounds way better. Since it's a wired system, I've had 0 dropouts in sound. And the huge benefit of this more traditional wired system, if you call it that, is that you can then upgrade and add components as you go. You don't have to do it all in one. And then maybe over time, I will add the Atmos speakers, if I can eventually decide on which ones to buy and where to place them without upsetting the whole of Reddit. And so, ultimately, it comes down once again on this channel to choice. Your choice. Do you want a system that's plug and play, that might suffer from glitches and software issues, but ultimately is vastly easier to install than a wired system, depending on your home, that has lots of smart home features, integration with everything, a slick app that has some great features built into it, again, when it works, then Sonos is great. Because if you are going from either nothing, or like me, a very old and tired home cinema system, to a new Sonos Arc Ultra sub and surrounds, you are not going to be disappointed. It sounds incredible, again, providing it works. Or do you want to get really the best audio experience for your money, even though it might be a pain to wire it in initially? Perhaps you enjoy doing all of the research and maybe even visiting local audio stores to hear the difference between speakers. Then a more traditional, like wired home cinema system is the best for you because, at least here on YouTube, nobody is right. In some situations, Sonos wins. In others, it loses. It is just about finding what is right for you. So for now, I'm going to stick with my KEF system, and the Sonos system will be going into my much smaller gaming room next door, which will be massively overkill for the size of the room, and hopefully over time, an app update will just fix the issues with the dropouts I've been having. But until then, don't forget to check out Homey, link in the description down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.